Hey guys, I'm your host, Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to this week's episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. My latest book, Kowabana Volume 13, is now out. Collecting even more of your favourite stories from the show, you can find terrifying ghosts, cruel curses, haunted buildings, weird monsters, and much, much more. You can find that on Amazon right now, and help support the show at the same time. This week, we're looking at some tales of spirits lingering behind and causing all sorts of trouble. Trouble that perhaps not everyone will escape from. First up, a monk retells a tale he heard at a previous temple of a deadly curse that seems to stem from an angry spirit, or perhaps even a deity. Find out why in Mushakuru-sama. At my last job before my last job, I had an opportunity to hear a strange story. People, regardless of sex or age, often came to our temple to ask questions like, "So this happened, will I be fine if I don't do anything?" Or, "What on earth was that?" The chief priest would skillfully make them think everything was fine and send them on their way. But during busy times, he wasn't able to properly deal with everyone who came. As I listened to him from the side one time, I suddenly had a thought. What exactly is anxiety? That's probably one of the reasons I joined my current department. I don't believe in psychic phenomena. I used to be afraid of everything as a kid, but our particular sect doesn't believe in ghosts, so naturally, I found myself looking for a rational explanation for everything as well. You might say I developed an approach of not being afraid, even though I was actually afraid. Even so, there are several incidents I've never been able to fully rationalize. A man by the name of A-san, alias middle-aged, came to the temple and prefaced his story by telling us that it happened just a week earlier. On a trip to the Chugoku region, he stopped at a local restaurant for lunch. However, it seemed that lunch didn't agree with him, and after he left, his stomach started to hurt. Being that he was on a country road, he couldn't find any convenience stores or anything where he could use a toilet. He briefly pondered getting out of the car and doing his business in a grassy area, but he didn't want to remember something so embarrassing on this rare trip he was finally able to take. And so he wandered around a little longer, doing his best to hold it in, until finally he saw a sign for a village-run meeting hall. Unable to hold it in any longer, he tried to run inside and almost collided with a woman coming out the front door. He asked her to please let him use the toilet, but she curtly replied, "We're closing. I'm about to lock up and leave, so please find somewhere else." But with his stomach about to explode, A-san refused to listen. He begged her again, until finally she gave in with a sigh, let him inside, and then he ran straight for the toilet. It was an old wooden building, so his footsteps echoed loudly, almost like they were mirroring his stomach. And because the unpleasant woman had also upset him, he found himself not really liking the place much. The toilet was quite large, with 3 stalls. Despite the urgency of the situation, A-san ran to the last stall, just in case the unpleasant woman came to check the windows or something. Perhaps there would be less smell due to the ventilation fan down there. However, when he got there, he found that the toilet had already been used and left unflushed. There was more there than seemed humanly possible. Fearing the toilet would clog if he tried to flush it now, A-san instead rushed into the one next to it. He managed to make it in time, and as he was enjoying a moment of sweet relief, he heard footsteps in the distance. They slowly approached and then stopped in front of the toilet door. However, A-san was still upset at how the woman spoke to him just before, so he didn't say anything. Assuming that she wouldn't enter the men's toilets, he continued doing his business at his own pace. 5 minutes later, his stomach finally cleared. A-san exited the stall. He hadn't heard any footsteps since they stopped in front of the door, so he assumed the woman was still outside. As he washed his hands, thinking about how mean and strange she was, he started to wonder if maybe she would think that he had left the mess in that last stall. But it simply wasn't an amount he could easily flush, and as he turned to look at the door, suddenly a bad feeling washed over him. The section above the doorknob was red. It seemed to be locked from the inside. He moved closer to confirm, and that was indeed the case. It was strange. He hadn't heard the door opening or closing while he was in the stall next to it, and he didn't think he was making enough noise himself to drown it out. He had heard the footsteps in the hall outside, so there was no way he wouldn't hear someone entering the stall next to him. Not only that, the toilet had been left unflushed and was in no state to be used. Nor had he heard anyone attempt to flush it either. Still, if someone was in there, that saved him trying to flush it, he thought. And as he turned to look back at the hall, he heard the sound of toilet paper being pulled in the end stall. So somebody is in there, he thought, relieved. But after taking a single step, he froze. That toilet had been empty when he came in, and there was no way that somebody could have passed him and entered without him knowing it. It was the strangest thing he'd ever experienced, and he stood there frozen, staring at the doorknob. Before long, he realized the sound of toilet paper being pulled off the roll was oddly long. It was still going and showed no signs of stopping. This normal, everyday sound suddenly made everything feel strange and uncomfortable, and took on a more terrifying meaning. And he was confused. He could hear toilet paper in a stall right in front of him that was supposed to be empty. His entire body broke out in goosebumps. A desperate fear gripped him that he couldn't explain. That he was the one person on the planet who happened to be right here on this spot, right now, at this time. And if the thing in that stall realized he was there, he feared it would all be over for him. Doing his best not to fall to the ground in fear, he made his way towards the door as quietly as he could. As he gripped the doorknob that would lead him to the hall, the doorknob now holding him up, this time he heard a strange sound coming from out there. It sounded as though someone was jumping on the other side of the door, but the time between jumping and landing on the floor was oddly long. According to A-san, it sounded like someone pole vaulting. Instinctively, he feared that if he went into the hall now, something even more terrifying would be waiting for him there. He couldn't go outside, and yet he couldn't stay in the toilet either. For no reason he could understand, suddenly A-san was overcome with emotion, an uncontrollable anger and desire to kill the thing that was jumping on the other side of the door. For some reason, he was convinced this was all happening because of that thing in the hall. If he didn't kill it, then he would be the one to die. If he killed it, then he would be safe. And if so, why should he refrain from killing it before it killed him first? He kicked the door open and ran into the hall. He stood at the ready, looking around for the thing he had to kill. But there was nothing there. He got down on all fours and looked for something small. But again, there was nothing there. He jumped to look out the window, but he couldn't even see a single bird. At this point, he couldn't stop the tears from flowing. He had to kill that thing, and yet there was nothing there. Nothing. Nobody. Not a single living creature. Why wouldn't the thing let him kill it? If he didn't, then he would be the one to die. Why couldn't he just do it? As he wiped the tears and tried to calm down, A-san suddenly had a revelation. He just had to kill that hag. She was unpleasant and weak, so he could no doubt do it easily. As soon as he had the thought, laughter spilt from his lips that got louder and louder. An irresistible sense of joy filled him at the thought of finally killing something, and he started running for the entrance. He ran outside from there, and then saw her open the passenger's side door of what was no doubt her small truck, and start looking for something on the floor. He let out a strange scream, and then ran as fast as he could towards her. When the woman realized, her face froze in fear, and then she jumped into the truck and locked it. A-san just missed her, and when he tried to open the driver's side door, she locked that just in time as well. Unwilling to let her get away, he then jumped into the rear tray of the truck. The woman slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and then started yelling at someone on the phone. A-san lost his balance, fell off the truck, and then hit his head on the ground. Apparently, he suffered a concussion. Thinking about how much he wanted to kill something, he lay on the ground, unable to move, and lamenting his bad luck. He cried, something he was not prone to do, as the sun set behind him. A short while later, several men that the woman had likely called showed up and surrounded him. He still couldn't move, but surrounded by living creatures he could kill, A-san felt himself getting worked up again. An elderly man who seemed to be the easiest to kill chanted some strange words at him, and then poured some strange, smelly water on me. A-san immediately had no idea what he was doing, and then passed out. He woke up in a bed in a small clinic and was back to his normal self. A police officer and the elderly man from before were sitting in the corner of the room. The officer asked A-san some questions, and he told him everything that had happened. He also mentioned that he had no idea why he started acting that way. He himself couldn't believe it, so he didn't expect the police officer to believe him either. He half expected the officer would arrest him, but no visible damage was done, so they let him off with a harsh warning. A-san had no idea what was going on, but he apologized over and over again. When he tried to apologize to the woman in the waiting room, she told him that was unnecessary. For some reason, the elderly were especially compassionate with him. The old man and the woman explained to A-san that he was cursed by Mushakuru-sama. Mushakuru-sama was worshipped in that particular area as something we might call a tatarigami, a powerful guardian deity if worshipped correctly, but could bring terrible disaster and misfortune otherwise. The name Mushakuru-sama came from either the phrase Mushakuru, the warrior is coming, or Mushakuru, the warrior goes mad. Those who are cursed by the spirit are bound by a strong compulsion to kill something living, and many often succeed. It was said that someone in that area was cursed by Mushakuru-sama once every few years. These people never had anything in common, and it was unknown whether they had violated some sort of taboo, or whether someone had cursed them on purpose. As for the smelly water they poured on A-san, that came from a pond to the west of the shrine dedicated to Mushakuru-sama. If you were cursed, then that water would cleanse you of it. Apparently, the only way to deal with a person cursed by Mushakuru-sama was to toss an animal at them, and while they were dealing with that, get water from the pond. Many families in the area kept large animals as pets to buy time just in case. After the water is poured on the cursed person, they somehow lose consciousness, and then, when they wake up, they're back to normal. Apparently, if you try to restrain a cursed person, there were numerous cases of the person biting their own wrists or even cutting the arteries in their own thighs with their fingernails in an attempt to kill themselves. You were unlucky, but considering other people this has happened to, you were also quite lucky, the old man said repeatedly. Tests showed that A-san hadn't suffered any damage from the hit to the head, so he was released from the hospital and he safely returned to Sapporo. But ever since then, A-san said he was afraid of sounds. Footsteps, things jumping, houses creaking, water drops, etc. They all made him tremble in fear. He was worried that either himself or someone near him might start acting like he did that day again. I don't remember what the chief priest said to him at that time, but if you think about it rationally, then he was no doubt suffering from a mental illness, or perhaps stress had caused him to snap, right? But for me, it's impossible to say he was mistaken, or it was just a coincidence, because something similar happened to my own grandfather on my mother's side. When he was young, my grandfather went on a sightseeing trip to somewhere in the Chugoku region with a friend and that friend's girlfriend. It was her hometown, and after they were done visiting her family graves, the friend had to use the toilet. Yet, as soon as his friend left the toilet, he suddenly punched my grandfather, who was waiting for him. My grandfather had a temper, so he punched him back, and it wasn't long until both parties were covered in blood. Apparently, he was surprised by how dirty his friend was willing to fight, like trying to poke his eyes out or strangle him, underhanded techniques he would normally never try. Before long, an elderly woman from nearby ran over, her face pale, and she poured water over the two of them. "What the hell are you doing?" my grandfather yelled, but next thing he knew, they were surrounded by men. Apparently, the girlfriend had been running around and gathering people as they fought. My grandfather said the reason his friend lost his mind like that was because of Mushakuru-sama. Maybe this was a transformation of Mushakuru-sama, or maybe my grandfather just heard it or remembered it wrong. But it was a curse, and because both of them were fighting, the locals feared that both of them were cursed, which was why they did what they did. My grandfather snapped, unable to accept that. They said that someone had a grudge against his friend, and this curse was likely man-made. While they had gotten rid of it this time, there was nothing else they could do for him. My grandfather tried to say something, but seeing his friend look like he knew what was going on, he suddenly shut up. And his girlfriend went pale as well. It turned out that the girlfriend had a fiancé before that. Yet my grandfather's friend, knowing that, still pursued her and stole her away from that man. The fiancé was a local from the village, but he was so dejected after that he left Hyogo Prefecture, where he was living at the time, and moved to Hokkaido. I think that man cast the Mushakuru-sama curse on my friend from Hokkaido, my grandfather said, but it was nothing more than a guess. However, a few years later, that same friend was arrested for killing his girlfriend. It was claimed that he went mad and planned to kill himself after as well. Until the very end, my grandfather was against my mother marrying my father, who was from Sapporo, and then moving there. There was also one particular prefecture he never stepped foot in again. He believed that there was someone in the Hokkaido region and someone in the Chugoku region who could kill people via curses. As for A-san, he's still alive today. Next up, a young boy is told not to play in an old storehouse on his grandparents' property. But of course, that just makes him want to go in even more. But what he finds in there might make him rethink matters. Find out why in Old Storehouse. This is the story of Otsuka-san, who lived in M City in Osaka. When he was around 4 or 5 years old, his mother often took him to his grandmother's house, which is now owned by other people. His memories of that house always remained strong, and at that house there was an old storehouse. This storehouse was located quite some distance from the main house, and it was massive, with thick white walls. Otsuka-san often played near that storehouse, but his grandmother was never happy about that. In fact, whenever she saw him playing there, she angrily told him off. "If you're going to play, then do so in the garden or in the house, okay? You must not play here." She told him this over and over again. Either way, why was he not allowed to even go near the storehouse, let alone go inside? If it was dangerous to go near, then wouldn't something like the well be even more dangerous than that? At any rate, if you tell children not to do something, that just makes them want to do it even more. Generally, the storehouse was locked with a sturdy lock, but one time, he found the door slightly ajar. Of course, this was a chance he couldn't pass up. Time for an adventure. The only light coming in was through a tiny window, and it was damp, dusty, and had a peculiar smell. But contrary to what he imagined, it was almost empty. There was nothing there. Yet his curiosity grew when he saw the set of stairs leading to the second floor from the entrance. Creak, creak, creak. With each step he took, the stairs creaked, signifying danger. What the? The second floor was the same as the first. There was still barely anything there. Otsuka-san was a little disappointed. With each step he took, dust blew into the air, and the sun filtering through the tiny window created little rays of light. That was about the only thing that caught his eye. He ran around, trying to kick up more dust into the light, not caring about how dirty he was, when suddenly he bumped into something. Ah! He fell to his backside on the ground. Then he stared blankly. He had no idea what he'd just hit. After all, there was nothing there. Just the dust quietly floating in the air. There was nothing there. Nothing there. Creak. In the silence, something creaked. It was behind him, coming from the stairs. Was someone coming up? "Grandma?" Otsuka-san asked before he could stop himself. He was worried about what he'd just bumped into, but he was also worried about what his grandmother would do if she found him inside the storehouse. Pulling his head in, he turned around. There was a face right there. It was a woman. A woman he didn't know. She appeared to be standing near the middle of the stairs, and she was staring at him with her head just above floor level. He could only see her face from the lips up, yet it was terribly vague, and he couldn't remember what her hair or her facial features looked like. Yet her eyes were wide open, although the black part was mostly hidden by her eyelids. She looked like a dead fish. Then the face immediately retreated. She didn't come back up, but nor did he hear her go outside. Suddenly, Otsuka-san burst into tears. It wasn't that he was in pain, or that this strange woman had done anything to him, but still, he cried his eyes out. It wasn't long until his mother and the others heard him and came running. But contrary to what he expected, they didn't get angry at him. Instead, when he told them what happened in the storehouse, they suddenly fell quiet. That night, as Otsuka-san was sleeping in the tatami room, he heard his mother and grandmother whispering on the other side of the sliding door. It was open again. The lock fell off. What on earth is going on? Even so, I don't know whether we can just demolish that, although he did mention it. When Nani-Nani-san saw it, it was packed with grinning pale faces in the darkness, right? The voices are also getting worse. I'm not as strong as I was back then either. I've been wondering what to do if they come to the main house. I can't even walk the hall alone at night now. I sensed something the other day. It was so terrifying that I screamed. He could remember his grandmother's complaints as though they had just happened. Yet, his grandmother's house disappeared before he grew up. It was demolished at the same time as the storehouse. These days, there's not a single person who knows about what happened in that storehouse, or what Otsuka-san experienced. And since then, a new house has been built on that land where his grandmother's house once stood. It's a stylish, Western-style house. From the outside, it looks normal, but it's hard to say if the part of the house where the old storehouse once stood is normal or not. Next up, some university friends lose one of their own, but the circumstances surrounding the situation are simply far too strange. What was really going on? Find out in The Way Kay Died. I was reminded of this story when a classmate from university invited me to a year-end party. During my third year at university, I was drinking with a group of my friends in December. Once we were done with the after-party, a few people left so they could make it to the last train in time. I remained with another 5 or so people, and we killed time at a small cheap bar until morning. I passed out as soon as I got home, and after lunch I got a call from one of my friends. Apparently, Kay had died in an accident on the way home the night before. That evening, my necktie felt strange and uncomfortable as I struggled with it on the way to Kay's wake. It was a strange sight, seeing those who had been messing around just the night before, now dressed in mourning clothes. And one of those same people was in that coffin. We left the wake early and then stopped at a family restaurant on the way home. I heard about what happened from S, who left with Kay. They both lived in the same direction, so they got on the same train to go home. They had a bit of an odd relationship. The girl that Kay used to date never clearly broke up with him, but there were rumors that around this time she started seeing S as well, so we nervously watched this triangle unfold. We all thought that Kay didn't yet know about S and his old girlfriend yet. While they were on the train, Kay seemed to be deep in thought about something. Whenever S tried to talk to him, he apparently just grinned back. When they reached the station Kay changed trains at, he said just one thing to S before getting off the train. "You be careful on your way home too." The doors closed, and S waved at Kay through the window glass. "He looked like he was glaring hatefully at me," S said about it later. The train with S on it was rather packed, considering how late at night it was. It started moving, but It hadn't gotten even 5 meters from the station when suddenly the brakes slammed on and it stopped. For quite some time, the train remained stopped with S and the other passengers on board. Then there was finally an announcement, and S learnt that the train had hit somebody. When the doors finally opened and S stepped outside, the station was in an uproar. The accident had occurred at the front of the train, and a crowd had gathered there. S walked over, wondering if maybe K was still there too. It seemed that once the train had started moving, someone either fell or jumped and got caught beneath it. Several staff members from the station were on the tracks, yelling and looking at something. S and the others watched from the platform, and then the paramedics arrived and pulled the victim out from under the train. S went pale when he saw the victim's jacket. It was the same college jacket our group of friends wore. S went to the hospital with K's family after that, and apparently dealing with the police was a whole big thing. He didn't get any sleep and his eyes were bloodshot and tired. "How the hell did he fall in front of the train I was on?" S said to us, his eyes unfocused. "We were sitting in the rear car, so how on earth did he get to the front so fast?" After that, his death even made it to a small magazine because of how mysterious it was. Apparently, the train driver never saw him fall either. Rumors also circulated that the police suspected S, and some detectives visited a few of our group members, but S and I saw less and less of each other after that, and when we graduated, I lost contact with him entirely. I don't know whether S was lying or not, but at the very least, when he was telling us the story, it didn't seem like he was making things up. Finally this week, 2 friends discover a secret room next to the apartment one of them lives in. What's really in there, and are they going to regret trying to get in? Find out in The Space Between Dreams and Reality. This happened more than 20 years ago, but please listen. It happened when I visited a friend who lived in a small 3 tatami mat large apartment that cost 30,000 yen a month. It was a cold winter's day, but for the 2 of us drinking in his apartment, it was rather comfortable. However, every now and then a cold breeze blew through the place, which bothered me. The window frames and such were brand new, so we didn't know where the breeze might have been coming from. I asked my friend about it and he said it was always like this. But then I noticed something strange after I used the building's toilet. His apartment was in a 2-story building. The toilet was on the right at the top of the stairs, and to the left were the apartments. Looking to the left from the toilet, there were 2 rooms, and to the right there should have been another 3. But there were only 2. The left side was smaller due to the stairs, so the 2 apartments there were a little larger, with the right side supposedly having 3 smaller rooms. However, at the end of the right side was just a blank wall. There was no door to speak of. The wall stuck out about 10 centimeters, making the hall just slightly narrower. I asked my friend about it, but he had apparently never noticed it. Looking at it from the outside, both sides had windows, so there was no doubt that there was a room inside. To solve this mystery, we decided to check out the closet on the wall attached to that room. We took everything out, and a cold breeze blew in from a gap in the boards in the back. The other side of the gap was dark, however, so we couldn't see anything. Finding it all a bit creepy, that night we stayed at another friend's house. The next day, we started investigating again, but it was still dark in there, and even shining a torch inside didn't help. It was too narrow to see anything. We explained what was going on to the person who lived across from the apparent room, but he said he didn't notice anything unnatural either. Only those who had lived in my friend's apartment could possibly know of the hidden room's existence. The wall in the hall was solid, and it was painted the same color as the rest, so other than it sticking out just a little, nothing about it stood out as odd. However, we weren't able to explain the mystery of it, so we decided to ask the landlord who lived nearby about it. The landlord was a gentle-looking woman in her 50s. However, she wouldn't tell us a single thing about the mystery room, and instead told us to speak to the real estate agency that handled the building. When we went to see them, a representative came out and then started speaking about the room. Apparently, the landlord had already contacted him about it. According to the representative, at present, that room was being used for storage, but he wasn't able to explain why there were no doors going in or out. It had been like that since before he joined the company, so he didn't know why. He then took out the rental agreement and suggested they would lower my friend's rent to 25,000 yen a month, but he said he'd think about it before we went back. My friend and I discussed matters once we were back in the apartment, and we decided we'd try to get into that mystery room. Maybe we could secretly use it or something. But then it seemed it would be easy to enter the room by cutting the paneling in the closet, so we got some tools from the hardware store and got to work right away. We decided to cut the top 2 panels. First, we drilled a 3-centimeter hole with the hand drill, and then from there, we started cutting with a saw. The boards were only around 1 centimeter thick, but we weren't professionals, so it was a little rough going. Mostly using the drill, we opened a hole about 50 centimeters by 40 centimeters. As we worked, we realized there was paper on the other side of the boards. There was paper alongside the sawdust the drill and the saw had created. When we removed the board, we realized they were protective charms. Feeling a little nervous, I went in. There was no sliding door in the closet, and as my eyes adjusted to the dark room, things gradually came into sight. It was a corner room, about 6 tatami mats large with 2 windows, but both were boarded. The front door was still there, but judging by the wall in the hall, it likely wouldn't open. It was then that I noticed something strange with the walls. There seemed to be some type of pattern. I shone the torch on the wall, and when I did, my breath caught in my throat. I thought it was a pattern, but the entire wall was covered in protective charms. The door, the boards on the windows, even the closet I was sticking my head through was covered in them. I was so scared that I couldn't move, and then I heard my friend say something behind me. "Let me in," he said, so I quickly moved, and when he looked inside, he fell silent. The charms were on the floor and the ceiling as well, and they were the only things in there. My friend seemed to be thinking about whether he should move or not. Then we heard a massive bang. We turned in the direction of the sound, but there was nothing there. Then that same sound seemed to come from all over the room, so loud that we could even feel it vibrating. The sound got louder and louder until the entire building seemed to be shaking. We could barely even stand, and we both jumped for the hole in the closet at the same time. As I struggled to fit through the tiny hole, my friend grabbed my ankle and pulled me back. But I was so scared that I shook him off and ran back into his apartment. He was also okay, but he seemed to have gotten back in before me. I looked outside, and all of the building's residents were standing out there. It seemed that noise and the vibrations had been experienced by all, and everyone was worked up about it. Yet as they all chatted together and calmed down, slowly they started going their separate ways. We returned to the apartment and put the boards back in the closet with some nails. We were going to cover the hole with plywood, but we were worried about the charms on the back of the boards, so we first attached the plywood to the boards and then put them back. My friend grabbed as much stuff as he could and then came to stay at my place. The next day, ending his rental contract and leaving the rest of the moving to a contractor. After that, we never went near that building again. As for why I remembered this story nearly 20 years later, I saw that same friend just the other day. We both have families now and live far apart, but I visited the area on business and it was the first time we'd seen each other in 15 years. As we chatted about our school days and such, we got to talking about that apartment, and that terrifying experience was still fresh in my mind. Apparently my friend visited that building several years prior, but because it was in Sangenjaya, it looked nothing like it did 20 years ago, and the building and even the road had been entirely renewed from scratch. Hearing that, I was relieved. Although it had gotten less intense over the years, the place that had been the source of my fears was finally gone. We chatted about this and that for a while after that, and then we said our goodbyes after midnight. But there was something we both wanted to ask each other first. Something I'd been wanting to ask ever since that day. I understood my own situation, of course, and my friend no doubt thought the same. After that incident, I never went on vacation with my friend, and of course, throughout normal life, both of us wore socks. No, even on the hottest days, we still wore socks, and that no doubt convinced me. My friend no doubt wanted to ask me the very same question. Do you have a bruise on your ankle as well? A massive thank you and shout out to this week's Kami tier members, Christina, Just Sawn, Estash, and Emerald. It's thanks to your support, along with everyone else, that I'm able to keep doing this show, so thank you very much. Don't forget to check out Kowabana Volume 13, out on Amazon right now, and check out our newly revamped merchandise store at kowabana.store. And if you'd like to chat about this week's stories, come and join us in the Kowabana Discord. You can find that link in the description or on kowabana.net. You can also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Tara A. Devlin for exclusive bonus stories and extras, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Kowabana Japan for all sorts of Japanese horror you won't find anywhere else. Thanks guys, stay safe, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.